the real topic that I want to dive into with you, because we've been having some interesting conversations around this, is basically the future, but namely AI, and what you see happening. I don't know, like what the hell's happening,
Yeah.
and what do you think's going on, and like
Yeah.
and where are we going, and what are you up to, like what are you doing in preparation of this this thing that's happening. um so yeah, I guess just to simplify the question, what the hell do you think is going on?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're seeing a phase change for human society in a lot of ways, right? Where, like, water will be liquid for a really long time, and the temperature changes, and the temperature changes, then all of a sudden it sublimates and phase changes, and now it's a gas. And, like, its properties are radically different and, like, can be compressed and, like, all these sorts of things, right? Um, and I think that human civilization went through one of these phase changes whenever we invented agriculture, right? We had hunter gatherers, whole different thing. Phase change happens. All of a sudden, agriculture effectively wins out, and all the norms change.
Mm.
And you and I and listeners here get to be part of this next phase change, which, unlike agriculture, which took thousands of years to, like, slowly propagate across the world, this AI thing is going to, it certainly seems like, is going to be happening much, much faster. Um, and has me being very excited. I'm super stoked for how this is going to move. And, like, I think there's a ton of stuff that we can be super optimistic and excited about that gets less media play than the, like, Terminator style robots are going to take over the world thing. Um, to me, there's, a lot to be hopeful there.
Yeah. Do you do you think this is, do you think this is bigger than the internet, or do you think these are
Yes,
kind of
for
both
sure.
kind of I feel like they're sort of on the large scale, they're sort of like the same thing essentially, but
I
um
mean, I think that I think that the internet was, of course, necessary for us to be getting so much digital data to train these models on. But I do think it is. I think the AI narrative is, to me, pretty different than the internet narrative. Of, like, the internet narrative is connecting to separate people and removing barriers to communication, and the AI narrative is more of, like, birthing what is effectively an alien life form almost.
mm,
A whole different type of structure with different goals and desires and all of this. Um, and I think, the internet changed many things about our lives, but not that much, right? In the grand scheme of things, like, sure, I can get a phone for my, or a car for my phone and this kind of deal. Um, but it really, it didn't really change our systems of education. It didn't it yet anyway, and it didn't
mm,
really change our system of governance. Didn't really change, how our transportation, right? As opposed to the AI or digital intelligence, which I think all of those will be very significantly impacted. Yeah.
yeah. And so I guess what you work with, you do work with AI.
hmm Yeah.
Like what, how do you use it today?
Yeah. Um, I think that, so I'll answer that first for how I use it, and it's a lot is coding for sure. It's incredible. Like, we've talked about this, like the speed up that happens to you as a developer is incredible.
Yeah, and you're
Uh,
using Cursor.
yeah, primarily Cursor. I did use Windsurf the other day, which is trendy in certain areas, but I think I'm sticking with Cursor for the time being.
Mm.
I'm glad there's competition in the space. Um, that's for sure in terms of, like, daily use, game changer. But I mean, I'm
Mm.
using it extensively whenever I'm figuring out how to cook food or whenever I'm deciding where I go in a town. It was ChatGPT suggestions to techno clubs in Seoul that brought me to the best party that I was at in Seoul.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
so what I really want to encourage is for people to use these tools a lot, because, like, you might as well learn this new skill set. It's like talking to these models and knowing how to draw information out of them effectively and how to assess its accuracy and how to figure out if that's something you should pay attention to or not. That's a meta skill which is going to maintain value and
Mm.
increase in value. And it's like, this is the new paradigm. Like, we're not saying it's good or bad. It's just, it is, that's the paradigm we're in as humans in 2024. So you might as well get good at using these models and how to talk to models, because it's such a force multiplier. And then also, I think getting good at talking to models will help you understand kind of the next early, like we're just seeing the beginning of the breaking of wave of AI agents. I think the average person probably hasn't seen it yet. I think coders have started to see it a little bit, things like Replit, cursor agents now. But I think in the next 12 months, we're going to see agents become much more prevalent. And those are, it's just another exponential increase in total power of the system.
And what can you describe what is an agent?
Yeah, so an agent, OpenAI has this heuristic as like the 5 steps to AGI, and I think agent is step 3. It's kind of the step we're moving into right now. And an agent is something that where instead of like where you give a goal and it seeks out that goal and then can break up a task into subtasks and handle those subtasks, right? So you're like, okay, hypothetically, this isn't here yet, but like rent a car, right? And then the agent's like, all right, like, well, I'm going to Honolulu. Here's the 3 different car agencies. Okay, let's look at the rates. Okay, let's pick the best rate. Okay, let's like maybe use a tool which like calls them. And it's just like kind of combining a whole bunch of sequential steps into one thing. So all I'm typing is rent me a cheap car in Honolulu, and it's handling all the logistics from there.
Yeah. Yeah, like the micro tasks within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, breaking down tasks into subtasks and critically assessing if that subtask completes successfully or not. So, because right now these models, you might ask a question, and it just spits you back an answer. There's not really an understanding of like, oh, did that like work or not? It thinks that it works, but like there's not a feedback loop of taking an action into the world, seeing what happens, maybe some code compiles, whatever, and then getting a result back and evaluating that result. So it's that feedback loop that really is the mark of the agents.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the big things the other day when we were, we were hanging out, looking at one of these agents that, looking at Replit, and which is used to build websites or web apps or whatever. Now, first of all, I've been trying Replit. Like I immediately went home and subscribed.
Nice.
But I've been severely disappointed so far. Like I don't know what Jack's doing. But like I cannot get the thing to build anything that actually functions.
Yeah.
Like even like simple websites.
Yeah.
It's not it doesn't I don't think it takes anything away from like where we're going. It's just,
Yep.
But I think one of the things that I think is profound about these agents, and I think what we're seeing is like it's being applied to programming first.
Yep.
Which I think would, and it makes sense because it's like all of the language and the interface and the protocol is already there. It's like its entire environment is already built to speak to machines. Mm-hmm. But one of the big things that blew me away about it was it would, you'd prompt it and you would say like, build me a landing page with a compelling 3D space animation as the background. This is the, like I'm building a dream app, a dream interpreter app. And so I've been using it for, playing with it for that. And it was like, this is what the app does. It's all about Jungian psychology.
Cool.
And it'll spit out in my experience, a 90% usable code base. But
that's generally what I expect these two is like, it gets you 90% of the way there a lot of the time.
Right. And that, but I think, and so that, I mean, that's already mind blowing, but then where it really, I think conceptually it really gets interesting is it builds the website and then it compiles it in front of you. So it starts to run the code in an interactive window, and you can see it go. It's like it starts up and it's going through the process. Okay, like the app is starting up. It's doing this. It's doing that. That's working. This is working. Looks good. And then it'll hit an error, and the error it's built so that the error shows up in the window, and the compiler, that the AI is like, oh, we hit a bug.
Yeah.
Something's not working. And instead of stopping and saying, hey, we got a bug, like, you deal with it, it's like, we got a bug and now we're just going to figure it out. So you just sit there and you sit back and watch, and this thing starts to debug its own process.
Yes.
That to me seems like a big, I don't know, that seems momentous.
Absolutely.
Like the fact that it's generating its own code, and then it's able to fix its own problems.
Yes.
Now again, I haven't been able to do much with it that it actually gets 100% work, other than like the most basic stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that's kind of irrelevant right now. It's like where we're going is
it's where we're going for sure. And also, like, there is something like, I mean, ultimately, and maybe we can hit on some of the philosophical perspective I have on this a little bit later, but like, whenever you're watching that error message, which is not computer code necessarily, the variable is a string and not an integer or something, and that's, always been the human's role, is to take that and then fix the machine. And then watching that error message come up, and then watching the prompt update on the side of, oh, I noticed we hit an error. Oh, I'm going to solve this string into integer conversion problem. And then watching the errored code magically update at a very quickly, pretty high speed.
Right.
Is, you're watching this step that was explicitly human for the history of programming, and you get to like watch it do this thing. Yeah, I think it's powerful for sure. I mean, I also had a similar reaction. The first time I saw this, I was really like, oh, this is, ChatGPT, GPT-4 would be step 2 in the OpenAI sequence. And then step 3 is agentics. And the first place we've really gotten a taste of that is for programmers. But it is very much that, like, that's just the lowest hanging fruit that we're going to grab. And like, the systems are going to just keep getting better and better and start taking more and more of those sorts of problems.
And so what are the next steps to AGI?
So at least in the OpenAI framework, and what is AGI is such a complicated question in and of itself. But in the OpenAI framework, then I believe step 4 is like domain expertise, where it's like the equivalent of a doctorate student in philosophy if you ask a philosophy question, the equivalent of a doctorate student in medicine if you ask a medicine question, where it's like it is fully mastered a field.
But aren't we kind of already there with the GPT stuff?
We're certainly moving there. I think there might be something about where they're starting to create new innovations in the field as well as part of step 4, where then it's like you're actually generating new knowledge. And like, so once you're getting into innovators, that's the name of it.
Right.
Once you're getting into innovation, then like that's another deep, profound thing, right? You've got an agent, it's seeking out a goal, and then you say, I want to understand this mathematical formula, or like I want to solve a new type of problem in biology, and the agent's able to do that, and then you've unlocked another kind of like existential layer on the stack.
Yeah, because that's been my so far, like I mean, you can see how like jaded I am, but it's like so far I use these tools all day long.
Yeah.
But I have not actually been that impressed with GPT in general. Like, and ask it a question, it spits out an answer, and it's like, okay, great.
Yeah.
I mean, it is amazing. It's incredible, but it's like it's almost like on an emotional or like energetic level, I'm just like, big deal,
Interesting.
But because I can I don't know if I can sense this, or it's like my understanding of it is like it only it only knows the data that we train it on, and so it's like it's like it can't actually generate anything new. I'm making assumptions here, of course, but it's like it's this assumption that it can't generate anything new. It can only regurgitate past ideas or whatever, the data. And so, and then in a way it's like it's spitting out averages. So it's like I think you can see this with image generators,
Totally.
Mid-Journey or something, where it
Yes,
has the
Apple, and it gives you the average of the average.
yeah, you say apple, and it's like it is like the quintessential average. Like what is an image of an apple that everybody in the world thinks of? Like that's the apple, but and you can feel it. It's like it's giving you generic apple.
Yeah.
And so that's been my hang up with getting too excited about it, is because it's just like I feel like there's it so far to me it hasn't proven capable of innovating, generating something new. And now I will say that the thing that did blow me away, like when I finally really lit up, was when I started using cursor and coding.
Sure.
And it wasn't even it was just the, I mean, there's for a number of reasons, but just simply for the effectiveness of, it's like working with this thing, and I'm able to code faster and work. I can work through problems that previously would have taken me hours upon hours of like scrolling through forums, Stack Overflow, looking for some obscure thing. And anyways,
definitely. So there's a couple things there. First off, like I'll use the Ilya Sutskever. Sorry for butchering his last name, but anyway, it was an OpenAI founder. He talked about, so this is a classic. So pulling back into your comment earlier about like the not generating new things and being trained on previous trained data, right? Stochastic parrot, this idea of just it's parroting out what was in the training data,
right?
There's a couple things there which I think are quite interesting. But first off, I would use Ilya's story, which is like, what is it doing? It's doing next token prediction, right? So it's just, if you're using GPT-4, not the O1 models, but GPT-4, the math equation that's running is like, what is the next letter effectively? And it just keeps doing that math equation. And you can say, I want an epic poem, about watermelons in the style of Ernest Hemingway, and away it goes, because it has its model of reality includes those. And so you can think about that. People bring that up in terms of like, oh, it's not creating anything new. It's just predicting the next token. But imagine you're reading like a detective novel, right? Like a whodunit murder mystery, right? And in the novel, in the training data, there's this text around, you're prompting, there's a story, and there's a murder, and there's clues, and there's like the detective interviewing people. And then the detective says, "Oh, I've got it. I've solved the crime." And the next, the person who did it is, and then you have it complete, the subsequent tokens, right? It's being forced to think about, all of this model of reality, and effectively, there's nothing in the training data that says Colonel Mustard did it in the ballroom.
Right.
It's inferring that in the exact same way that you and I would, of understanding all the clues, understanding the model of reality those clues exist inside of, and then just predicting the next token. But in this case, it would be solving the murder mystery puzzle, right? And so I feel like that's a good example of like, even if you're just solving next token, you still can be creating like new ideas that like there's never anything in the training data about the outcome of that specific thing. And so I think you can really get into that of like, whenever you're combining these different abstract concepts, of I want, like the avocado chair is something that's popular amongst the image generation thing, because it's a combination of random things that don't exist in reality. Like there's no such thing as an avocado chair. But if you prompt Midjourney with avocado chair,
Uh,
you'll get this the combination of these two things. Now, is that in the training data? For sure. Is that also something entirely novel and new? Also, I would say yes. You know, so
yeah.
even if you're still working on those existing tokens and existing training data, there's still this really incredible potential for combinatorics to be creating, new ideas in the same way that I think, an entrepreneur or just, someone writing poetry is going to be taking existing concepts, combining them in new ways, and creating new output. Um, to me, it's like, it is a different thing than humans. Like what these models are doing is a different thing, but there is a lot of equivalence in some ways and not others. So it's like it's hard to use a human standard for innovation on some of this. It's like, it's kind of like it's doing its own thing, which has many attributes of innovation and many attributes of new thinking, and some aspects that are still biased towards what the training data is.
Wait.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
what? Um, how is it different? How is it doing something different than? Or
hmm
I mean, bigger question
yeah,
is what makes us different than these
yeah,
machines? If we're approaching this sort of singularity
yeah,
event, what? Yeah, what is it doing differently, or
totally.
is there anything different?
I mean, there's so many different ways to go with
Or
that.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, but
What is it, just to
yeah,
simplify with specifically with what you're talking about? What is it doing differently
yeah.
than a human?
Um, humans, and it's also tricky because humans don't really understand our own consciousness very well, right? There's no test I can do to prove that you're not a pea zombie or
Mm.
this kind of stuff. Um, the way that we're goal-seeking agents is we have objectives and we move towards them. We have these different drives, and they're all kind of mishmash. Like there's a high degree of complexity there, right? And so to me, like a core difference when I think about interacting with these systems is that the human kind of provides the vector, the angle in this like ultra high dimensional space, and like humans are quite good at that, right? Where's the idea? What vector
Mm.
should we be tracking? Because if you're just doing next token predictions, it doesn't matter. You can be writing, Victorian poetry. You can be trying to predict the next move in the stock market, all of which are encoded in the latent space, all of which are in the model. And so there's something, yeah, I think that's something that I
Determining the
sense.
aim,
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
human
yeah,
the human is able to take all of this multidimensional data and determine what direction to move.
I don't know how much they grasp on the multidimensional data, but they're giving it like this almost like spark of life of like, oh, I want to move along this direction. I want to write an incredible
Mm.
poem, to my sister, and then have it, write out,
But
go along that
I
way.
think this is an interesting question though,
Yeah,
because like something that's been coming up along the lines of these agents is right now the agent is you give it its you give the big aim, book
hmm
me a rental car, and
yeah,
for the agent, in the agent's reality, that's that's its like purpose of existence almost.
yeah,
And then it can break that down, break down the steps. But then what happens when that agent starts to determine what the next goal is on its own? So you would
yes,
say, you wouldn't even say anything. It would just like once it books the car,
yeah,
then the agent has this ability to then determine what the next goal is, which is more or less what it's determining its own fate or something, its own pathway of what is the aim and intention, what direction to move in. And right
yeah,
now the human is determining that.
yeah.
um
And on a meta level, that would still be true, right? Where the human is still saying, okay, you're a travel agent, and you respond. Your goal is to help solve humans' travel logistical issues or
mm,
something like that, right? Um, and a big part of agents is getting them to not keep generating subtasks. Like,
mm,
knowing when to terminate's a really important thing. Of like, You can imagine if you sent a query on Cursor of like how to improve this function of code, it's really important that it stops improving at some point. Like it can't, and there's a lot of good research that happens in terms of how do we make these systems create the right number of tasks, not too few, not too many.
Mm-hmm.
I also, I wanted to touch back on something else you hit on earlier of like the feeling you get when you're interacting with these systems. Because like, I think that's very interesting. I think there's a lot there. And I think also the feeling we get when we interact with any type of systems, computers, podcasts, large language models, cars, is also deeply culturally determined in a lot of ways. Like, Russians call all their boats masculine names, and Americans call all of our boats feminine names, and these sorts of things. These cultural narratives of what these systems are, I think, is important. And so to me, I remember whenever I first had this like aha moment of I'm writing code and I hit some bug and I'm using, GPT-4 at the time to solve the issue, and we got it. And it was a we. It was like a genuine we, where it was like me. And, as a professional software developer, I've certainly pair programmed with senior devs, and that's what it felt like. And to be clear, I was not the senior dev. Like, GPT-4 was the senior dev. I was just, making a couple suggestions here and there and like helping nudge it around. And I got done and I just sent a query of just like, excellent. That's like a really elegant solution. Like, that's it. And it was like, that was so intuitively that it almost would be offensive for me not to say like, nice work there. Like, that was a tricky little thing that you just did.
Oh yeah. I say thank you. Yeah. I'm like, perfect. Yes. Like it'll give me something. I'm like, oh, this is great. Thank you.
And also, what's wild is actually complimenting the models and getting them excited creates better answers, which is insane. In fact, I deeply love this. So there's a paper out about a year and a half ago about telling. You may have heard of the prompt strategy of think step by step. I don't know. It's good. It's called chain of thought reasoning. Basically, for a long time, and it's still true to some degree. If you just wrote, what's 27 minus x equals 4? Think step by step. If you just add the phrase think step by step, you would get a very significant increase in performance.
Oh, interesting.
That has gone down now for lots of reasons, but very much a thing. And there was this other paper that looked at some of these strategies, and one of the strategies they said was take a deep breath, improve GPT-4's mathematical performance by like 3%.
Including that in the prompt.
In the prompt, just like, hey, I want to solve this equation. Here's the equation. Take a breath. Let's solve it together. And if you add take a breath, it small increase in performance, but statistically significant, which is like blows my mind that like telling these machines to do this uniquely human thing actually improves statistically their mathematical performance. And it's because it's in the training data where, humans, whenever they're being guided to take a deep breath and then go through something, perform better. And so the quality of their output tokens according to evaluation is better. And so it's an effective technique to like bump them into a slightly more accurate, kind of part of the latent space.
Wow.
Which is just so beautiful to me. Like, what a unique, and I think it highlights the unique bond that like humans and digital intelligences or digital sentience is going to have.
Yeah, man. I mean, well, so this like I had a similar my aha moment.
Yeah.
Was I was building this dream interpretation app which uses ChatGPT to analyze dreams. And I'm building the app and I'm using Cursor, and it was of course immediately the change, it was already profound, but it was like maybe like a week into it. It's like I started
a learning curve. Yeah.
Well, and I started really getting in this. Yeah. So it's like I'm getting good with it. I'm like in the zone. I'm focused on, like, I'm in this vortex with the project. You know how this goes with, like, I'm sure with coding. And I think like I hit this. It wasn't like a specific moment. It was more like I got into this headspace, this experience where it's like it starts with me instructing AI, the GPT or Cursor, like, hey, I like build a function to do this, or like I would this is what I want to do. Like, how should I structure the files? What how do I organize this? The architecture, whatever. And then as I'm going, it starts to give me ideas, and it's like if you I'm like it's like, oh cool, now that we can do this, by the way, you can also do all of these things. And so the project starts getting bigger in scope, and then it reached this point where it was like I felt like it was just like, tell me what to do. Like it's like I'm no longer the lead here. Like, or it's like I'm guiding it, but it's like I am at your discretion. I'm the physical meat mech, just executing things in 3D space at your discretion. At your instruction. Tell me what to do, and it's like it's a collaborative thing, but it's doing a lot of the guidance.
Yeah,
and it started. It was almost like a spiritual experience where I was like, I felt like it was like an emotional experience where I felt like I was a channel for this entity, this thing to communicate through me to build the app, and I'm building. It's like, tell me what to do so that I can birth you into the world. It's like I'm building an app to interface with you. Show me what to do so that I can open up this portal and allow like things in this 3D space to then, in this dimension, to communicate with this thing that that feels like it's in another dimension. Like, it feels like an alien intelligence, like this is some kind of entity, that is beyond it's like the same way that we don't understand our own consciousness, like we don't really understand how this thing's working either.
Yes.
And but something's coming through, and then it's like I connected with it in this way. Like, it made me think of that's what's that Christian, the thing where it's like God is in the sky and it's a painting.
Oh yeah, in the Sistine Chapel.
He's reaching down and he's like it's like they're touching fingers, and it was like, it felt like this moment where it was like our fingers connected, and suddenly it was like electrified.
Yes.
And I was just a conduit for this thing, which is like, I mean, this is how I feel anyways. It's like I'm just like my body is just a channel for some kind of consciousness to come through that is beyond my understanding. I'm just doing what it wants me to do, and now I'm connecting it with this other with some other source, and becoming a channel for that.
Definitely.
That was my aha moment where I was like, hold the phone, man. This is like this is more than just like a sophisticated Google answering my prompts. This is like, I mean, I already knew it. I knew this was the case, but this is like when I really felt it at like an emotional.
And that's an important thing, the difference between the intellectual understanding of like, oh, these are really, incredibly complicated systems, to the like heart sense of like, whoa, like, I just had a deep like existential meaning, going on. I feel like I'm actually corresponding with something in the same way that I feel like I feel your presence in the room, where you get that feeling. But I'm like, whenever you're, and the moment which you get that, I think is big. And that's why a lot of times I encourage people just to talk to models, like just go out and like play with these things and see what they're good at and not good at, because I think it helps build that framework so then people can kind of have that moment. And I did also want to touch a little bit on the prompt crafting thing, because like I think that's also a deal of like, if you're asking about apples, at first you're like, okay, what is this? Like on Google, if I want an apple, I type in apple. Okay, great. But whenever you're learning how to use these systems, it's like, okay, if you get an apple, you're going to get decidedly the average of every single Apple advertisement in the history of man. but you're like, I want an apple, on a shish kebab over a fire being held, on a beach at sunset with dolphins jumping. And then bam, you get that. And you almost have to rewire your own cognition a little bit of like, okay, how do I interact with these systems to get value out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this also comes up on the coding thing or on all these different domains of like getting good. I can say, hey, I've got a business idea. What do you think of this? Or I can say, you are a principal investor at Y Combinator with a deep understanding of mobile app, consumer facing mobile app ecosystem. Please give strict, honest mix of positive and negative comments. And that's going to really give you a completely different type of outcome than if you just give it over kind of neutrally. And so that's you hit on the average thing before. But I think that a lot of people really might not realize how big of an impact that can make in terms of the value you get out of these systems by just telling it to be brilliant. You're a world expert at X. You're a professor of X at Yale. Give me the answer. And then to really push it down these vectors of like giving really high quality output. And it's a skill. Like I feel like it's something you kind of have to learn through experience.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think something that this is something that's been coming up for me lately, which is like very like half baked. Not half baked. This is more like it's almost like an intuitive sense or something that I'm just kind of picking up on. But it's like, and I don't know that it's a bad thing. I think it's just kind of interesting. But it's like I feel like one of the things that's happening is that it is shaping our consciousness to interface with it correctly.
Yeah.
And it's like we're the fact that we're sitting here talking about prompt engineering and we're basic. It's like, how do I restructure my thoughts and my communication and my thinking in a way that will get a better output from this machine. But it's like it's almost like a puzzle piece plug. It's like a USB plug that it's like I have to like figure out like what are the pins what order of the pins to like interface with and connect with this thing.
Definitely. And I would go one step further where to me it's like it's deeply changing what I think about what is possible and like where I should be putting my energy towards, right? Like I'm thinking of this new, social media app and like what chunks I'm going to build myself versus like by understanding these systems, I'm recognizing, like some of this stuff which would have required hiring a database engineer to give me input on, now I can get done in 2 minutes in a public library, just over the internet, right? Just me sitting there and prompting away. And so then it's like, like what startups are interesting ideas, like what effort, what personal projects should I be putting energy into? And it's with the cognition of what these effectively alien intelligences are going to be really good at, and like I want to kind of align myself with that. A phrase that I've been throwing around, which I'm very pleased with, is an Atin original, which is reverse alignment. So people talk about alignment, which is like getting the models to respect, to have human goals, right? Is alignment. The rationalists talk about this as extrapolated human values and things like this. But to me, I'm starting to think exactly what you're like along those lines about reverse alignment, which is like, how do I update Atin's model of reality such that it most beautifully and harmoniously fits into the world that's coming into existence, into what the alien intelligence effectively needs and wants, right? And this can look like thinking about like the role of humans. Like to me, when I think looking forward from like a reverse alignment perspective, it's like humans should just get really good at doing human things, right? So like, and being very comfortable with handing over things that are existentially important to me right now, as a software developer. It's, I learned Python Flask the other day, and I was like, this might be one of the last frameworks I ever learn, like in my whole life. Like, it's not going to make sense to learn low-level frameworks like this for much longer at all. I had to make I wanted to make a sticker the other day. I had a lossy image, like a very low pixelated image, and I wanted to make a vector version. I had to manually in Illustrator go and make the copy. And as I did it, I almost had this like moment of nostalgia or sadness because like this is one of the last times humans are going to do this. Like very soon, this is going to be a task that's just going to bam happen instantly. And so it's a very
Right.
interesting kind of feeling I get when I'm doing one of these tasks where I know it's going to be gone out of the human existence very soon.
Well, so like what are these things that humans are good at that
Yep.
like because I think this is I feel like this is kind of the existential question that we're approaching is when everything mechanical can be automated, um then
Mechanical in the broad definition of mechanical, like in the in the
yeah,
very large of like anything with a sequence of predictive steps and success and failure, like
right.
all of that.
Right. And well
Yeah.
and so and not to get too far ahead of things, but I think this touches on what Gurdjieff,
Mm.
like what was core to his teachings was like this idea that humans, that man is a machine.
Oh, interesting.
That we're like 99% unconscious, and that like it now that it is possible to wake up, but it's like but basically the one of the core ideas is that humans are machines, and I actually do I was part of this. I was deeply involved in his work and his teachings and his foundation for almost 10 years. And so it resonates. I actually,
Yeah.
I not of course I have my own ideas about it, but I think basically it's just to say that I think a lot of what he was talking about is kind of true. Like it's
Yeah.
like he's not wrong. And so
Yeah.
if that's the case, if we are machines, then theoretically, if you extrapolate that, it's like everything can be automated. Um, you know,
I mean, so certainly like the scientific determinist perspective of human consciousness, right? Where it's like a sequential series of steps, the subconscious achieving goals of the id, and all of this. There's a lot of like machinery like things there. I would say though to that point in terms of like what are these authentically human things? I think that like um well I definitely think that we generate very interesting data. In fact, this is part of my reason for my deep existential hope as to why artificial intelligence will find humanity very interesting is that like we generate a very different and far greater form of complexity of data than any other form on life as far as we know, right? Like
mhm.
we do all this goofy shit. We generate so many tokens per minute. Like, if you looked at
The fact that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles
yeah,
is a thing, like exists,
yes,
like that, like that's
they
just
love Italian cooking.
right. Yeah, it's like like the most. I feel like it's like such the perfect example. Like the most like wild thing that we could come up with is like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
So many just ridiculous, crazy juxtapositions
Yeah.
and changes in fashion. Like how many, how many bits would it take to make a perfect model of a squirrel? Like very low number of tokens. Like I dig on squirrels, but like, you don't need a whole like the information space to describe that's pretty fixed. Humanity, like the output is this emergent phenomena of
Mm.
like all this wild energy that generates all this sorts of things. So all that to say, I think that lets me be very hopeful that like we're going to be part of the future because we're goofy humans. We bop around, we do fun things. We have like all these unusual, interesting informatic phenomena that play out.
Like we'll
Um,
be allowed to stay because we're cool enough
I
to
think we'll
like keep
be
around.
yeah, I think we'll be welcomed. I think we'll be an enjoyable part of the universe in the same way that squirrels, rocks, and super intelligences and stars, all are kind of part of that, and all are kind of playing their role. Um, I'm very optimistic. Yeah, I'm very optimistic in that, and I do think that inherent human things of like singing, dancing, partying, loving, fucking, like interacting with each other, solving conflict within each other, all these sorts of things. These things are innately human things. These things I think will very much have value even after artificial superintelligence is here. Um, where, those are just inherently human things to do, in just the same way that purring is an inherently cat thing to do. And like, can you simulate? Can I write an equation to describe purring? Like, probably, but like you get into the qualia of the experience, stuff like this.
But then it's like I feel like it's getting to this place where it's almost like decommodification, where it's like well, because it's like, well, what is that value? Like, what is the value of loving?
Yeah.
Of course, it's valuable, like connection, like, like whatever, like we all need it, we all want it, we all value it, but it's not something that you can commodify yet.
Yeah, quantize. Yeah. You can't put a number on that.
Or I can't scale it. Or I mean theoretically maybe you can, Amma, the hugging guru, exactly, or whatever. But it's
various social hacks, Osho.
Yeah, but in a sort of day-to-day practical sense, it's like I don't know. I just wonder if that's what we're moving towards, is a decommodification. It's like what starts to become important is my individual experience. Like if right now I feel like we're focused, like the past, whatever, all of history has brought us to this point where our focus is on what we produce, the cultural artifacts that we create, and which is basically sacrificing my current happiness to work. The idea of work is that, like, I don't want to do it now, but if I do it now, something greater will be produced in the future. And so I'm willing to sacrifice my well-being, or my preference right now, because there's a bigger goal. And but it's like, if that is no longer, I don't know, if that's no longer the case, then we go into the space where we're doing it only for the enjoyment, which is like things like singing and music and dancing or whatever. But because it's not prompting, like,
interesting. That is an interesting point.
Because I have a leggings brand.
Yep.
I generate images with AI to print on the leggings. And I've gotten to this place where I don't want to slave away at Photoshop. I don't want to spend 10,000 hours at Photoshop to design the leggings. And now we have these tools that can design like pretty cool designs pretty quickly. But what I'm finding is that I don't want to do that either. Like, I'm prompting. And I'm just like, this, like, this, like it was fun for like a little while. It was fun until the novelty wore off, and then now it's just like, it's like, whoa, like maybe like, what can I do today? Like, I could go design some leggings. It's like, well, I don't know, man. That means I'm gonna sit in front of ChatGPT and Midjourney, and I'm gonna sit around and prompt engineer for the next 4 hours, and that's not what I want my experience to be either.
Sure.
Even though there's a goal, there's a business, there's an art thing, there's, like I'm sacrificing, but it's like, I
mean, the thing that jumps to my mind when I hear that kind of story is like, there is a thing on the work role that I want to touch on, but within that context, it's like, if you really wanted to have a leggings with giraffes, whatever, giraffes, at a rave with a inflatable like duck arms on the whatever, and you're like, oh, I want that, then you're excited to be designing leggings, because you're like, oh, this is the output is like, man, like, I've always loved giraffes, and I love giraffes at raves, and I love giraffes wearing unique leggings, and like make it meta, and then you're like, oh, cool. And then, you can get onto Midjourney very quickly. You can get giraffes at a rave, and then you're like stoked, and they show up, of 10 days or however, whatever your cycle time is later, and they pop out of the box, and bam, like you've got this thing that you dreamed into existence. No one has ever seen a giraffe with leggings at a rave on leggings ever before in all of human history, from the dawn of time until now. And you just manifested it and just like materialized it out of effectively nothing, you know, out of electricity, and sand, you know, doing math. Like that to me is very wild. Now, whenever the incentive structure is flipped around, and you know, there's a business component, there's these other things, then you're maybe getting alienated away from that process.
Yeah.
And I guess what I'm hopeful for is, and feel very confident we're moving towards, is the world where, yeah, it's like, it's this incredible tool to make these things unbelievably quickly. And it could let you actualize your like higher self, your ideal self, your Ubermensch, whatever, like very purely. Because we'll be in this kind of post-scarcity environment. And that has me super excited, and I'm trying to get better at doing these things as well. Like I, you know, have a conversation. We had a conversation at our Airbnb the other day about, wouldn't it be sick if we had a little device I could put in between us that said how true the statements were in the conversation. You know, it's listening, sending it to a large language model. Model comes up with a score, sends it back, and there's like a comically large arrow of like how true or not true something was. Yeah. To like make that product even a few years ago would have been total witchcraft. Like impossible. Like you had $1 billion 5 years ago. I have $1 billion and I'm gonna spend it all on hiring research teams to build that. Impossible. Yeah. And now it's like, oh yeah, like I think we could do that in like, you know, 40 hours of work, like a single week. Yeah. And then that'll move down to a single day and this sort of thing.
Well, that was another one of the aha moments that that I had with this Dream app was, I mean, and this is kind of geeky, but it's like I ran into this problem where it's like I want to record the conversation, like the chat needs to know the conversation context in order to provide the right answer, but how does it? But I don't want to save. I only want to save the dreams, or like I only want to analyze the dreams, not the whole conversation. So how do I know when we're talking about a dream, or just like, hey, how are you today? And it's like in the past, I think I would have had to come up with some crazy, algorithmic
analysis.
Yeah, and it wouldn't even be effective. Like it would have like bullet holes all the way through it, and it would have I would have had to come up with this whole system of like, how do you determine if it's a dream, or the alternative would be like having a user interface. Yeah, start
dream mode, click. Yeah,
exactly. But that requires effort, work on the user part. And this actually came from chat, from Cursor. I was like, hey, this is the problem that I'm trying to solve.
Nice. You're asking about the root problem.
And
which is a wise thing.
Yeah, and this is where this is when it was all starting to come together. It was like before I even had anything close to a solution, I was like, hey, this is the problem that I'm trying to solve. What do you think? How can I do this? And it was like, well, use me, and it was like every message in the conversation, send it to GPT and say, is this a dream? And then there's a system prompt, like, you are a dream specialist and you only answer yes or no. Like, is this a dream? Yes or no?
Yes.
And it is like 99% accurate. It's it gets it every time.
Yeah.
And so like there's something about that like not only is that amazing, but it's like it was it really is. It's like truly, I don't
understand what's going. It's just like bonkers.
I don't know how I would even describe to a machine or to anybody what constitutes a dream. How like okay, you want me to be a dream, yes or no, is it a dream? And it's like, well, how do I know? And it's like I don't know. I can't. How do you determine if I say I was flying over New York City? It knows it's a dream.
Yeah.
But like as an objective statement, it's just like that. Like that's not necessarily a dream. And so it's like I don't know how I would even describe that task.
Yes.
And it's like able to it's like a it feels like another programming interface. It's like we have
Yes.
if statements, if then, what, like these binary kind of choices or switch statements and things. Whereas I feel like with this, it's a new type of process that you can just throw. It's like this messy if statement. Like you just kind of throw something at it, and it just figures it out.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know so that was another big.
Definitely. I've also had similar moments of that. And also that's extra poetic because you're using AI to talk to an AI. Like you're building an interface to AI with AI. So you get an extra level of the meta going on in that loop, which is, I think adds to the impact, right?
Yeah, it's like tell me how to bring you into the world. Like tell me how to birth you.
Yes.
Just like I'll just show me what to do and I'll execute it. Like I don't.
Yeah. And I think that those sorts of like aha moments are so key in like how people interact with these systems. And also I think it helps reduces the fear factor around a lot of this stuff of like, oh, okay, like, these are another type of system. And if you're building this practical experience, you're like, oh, okay, like we can be teammates here. But if you've never interacted with these systems before and you only every once in a while see this stuff, kind of drip out and you're not using them regularly, then I understand why people get the reaction they do. And this actually touches on something I wanted to bring up before, which you were hitting on, of the work role at play, which is like, I think the biggest birth pain that humanity is going to go through over the next 20 to 30 years is uninstalling the identity comes from work. Because it was essential and was totally true. You imagine like the hypothetical, first European arrivals to the North America, right? It's like, well, like, you needed to have a society that built up these structures or everybody died. And if Bob's being lazy, it's not just hurting Bob's survival odds, it's hurting everybody's odds. And like culturally, you are so, evolutionarily so incentivized to get people's identity. You are a blacksmith and like your dad's a blacksmith. And
Baker.
Your family's yeah, exactly. Yeah, Warden of the Woods.
Yeah.
Yes, exact same thing, right? Your core identity comes from fulfilling this role to your community, which is beautiful and was perfect. Like was not perfect, but was certainly a good thing and like evolutionarily an advantage in many ways. Though Havari has some interesting things to say on this of like, was that really better than the hunter-gatherers? But setting that aside.
Right.
But that uninstall process of that cultural programming of that is huge. And is going to be the thing I suspect that humanity is going to struggle with the most over the next 30 years of like all of a sudden, you've worked your whole career and, you build car doors and like you work in Detroit and you build a physical, tangible object and you go home at night and you're like, I did a thing. Like I physically formed these objects using my skills and tradecraft to make this thing. And then one day you wake up and there's a Tesla Optimus moving a box in the corner and just recording every single thing that you do. And you get this very weird feeling, which is accurate, which is your subconscious realizing this thing that your identity, your purpose in life comes from. And it's recording you, but you don't really understand what's going on. And then all of a sudden, the guy down the line from you is suddenly a robot. And then all of a sudden, you and every other person doing what you do in a very short period of time suddenly no longer, we robots are making car doors now, and then that's just game over for that whole path. That's brutal. It's evolutionarily unprecedented, and it's just going to happen whether or not we like it or not. So we might as well. And so I like to highlight this to people of just being like, hey, we want to start working on this now. Like start deriving these other narratives that you get meaning from now. And because like I enjoy programming, but I know that 10 years from now, I'm not going to be writing any code, like, barring truly globally catastrophic nuclear war type scenarios. That's not part of Atin's future. And like, am I bummed about that? Yes. I'm also bummed that like, the way that I DJ now is going to be changed so radically, right? I get a lot of identity from, sourcing tracks from Bandcamp and mixing them together in this certain way. I think there will be some form of musical performance, but like that specific version with 2 Pioneer CDJs and a mixer, like that's probably going to go away. And that does make me sad. But to me, it's like you just got to embrace the adaptability and the change and recognizing that we're going to be removing our sense of identity from these sorts of things and finding new avenues for that energy to flow into that's authentically human.
Yeah.
And I mean, and there's existential questions to society there too. This gets into the universal basic income stuff, which I
Right.
think we're going to have, but that's also going to be so upsetting for people, of like, you can sit on your couch all day and the government's pretty much going to pay you potentially. But there's going to be a lot of conflict that comes out of this, I suspect.
Yeah. Well, I think it just as you're talking about it, I feel like there's also two types of work. Like there's work where like you're doing a job that you're not really interested in.
Yeah, it's a
You're
good distinction.
you're being paid to it's like
Yeah.
like your energy just isn't there. Like you couldn't give a shit.
Yeah, yeah,
And like yeah, you do the job and like maybe it's like enjoyable enough, but
yeah,
you don't really care.
yeah,
And I think that's where yeah, well, so there's that, and then there's the type of job where you are genuinely excited about getting from
at
A
least
to B.
some of the time.
Right.
Yeah,
Or yeah,
you might not love building car doors all the time, but you really like that feeling when you put the container and you staple it shut, and you're like, all right, I did this whole thing.
well,
I feel
it,
like there is a lot of times a mix.
yeah, and with the leggings example, actually, this is it's like I think what's happened is that there's this design. So I've been caught in this space of like I'm going to design leggings in general.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I have
Yeah,
I have a
right,
shop,
right.
and I'm just gonna produce leggings, and it's brought me down this path of like actually I don't really want to sit around prompting mid journey. I would rather like, and what I'm actually doing is like automating that. So it's like how can I create a system where like it just generates cool leggings. But it's like what's happening is that system is the thing that I'm more interested in than the actual outcome of the leggings, because I can make the leggings if I want to spend some time prompting.
Yeah.
But it's basically like I'm not so excited about that, and so it's like I don't really want to do this. I don't want to sit around prompting all day.
Yeah.
Whereas when I do get a specific idea for a specific leggings, then I get excited, and this whole system or like generic prompting thing doesn't matter. It's like I'm getting from A to B. I'm making unicorns floating in space. And I'm gonna get them on leggings by within a couple hours, and like this is and it's coming together. Yeah. And when you are excited like that, then using these things it is exciting. It's like I do want to do that because that's much faster than developing a system to produce all leggings.
Yes.
And but I guess it's just to say that there's like this sort of the boring work that you're paid to do for somebody else that you don't care about, or the more entrepreneurial work where you have an idea that it's like you really want to see this thing realized and manifested, and now you have these tools that make that increase the capabilities, and so I don't know where I was going with that, but I guess like that won't go away. Like that'll always be, in like the people who and so it's like it kind of separates. It's like sure you can get paid to sit on your ass and take Percocet and eat fast food and
South Park,
and like I guess I don't think you're going to be very happy.
Yeah,
it's an option though, and then meanwhile there will be like a smaller segment of the population that is just like producing the most insane shit we've ever seen.
Yeah,
with the most excitement,
Yes. And you actually said something there that I also wanted to really hit on, which is I think what rekindled both of our passions for software development, which is the dopamine loop of success, right? Because before, I've always been a high-level thinker. Software development, I was good, reasonably good at it, but it wasn't something, because I would get stuck and I'd be like, oh, this function was working a second ago, but it turns out that this is a float 16 and not a float 32, and Stack
Who cares?
Overflow,
Who
and I'm
fucking
just
cares, man?
my goal is to make this interface to the user.
Yeah.
And so then I would just get stuck. I would forget a semicolon or whatever, and you lose an hour, and then you make some progress, but you break something else, and like I wouldn't get that same momentum. Now that is so different.
Right.
Like I mean, I'm getting done, and I forgot a semicolon. I hand over 15,000 lines of code to GPT, and I say, hey, there's something wrong. Here's the error message. And it fixes that and also offers me 3 other suggestions. And then I keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get that dopamine loop from what you're saying of like the end-to-end process of today this screen didn't work, or yesterday this screen didn't exist, and now this screen is totally functional so quickly.
Well, it's not even, I think that's a bigger dopamine loop. Like I think the smaller ones are solving that problem.
Absolutely.
It's like every 5 minutes you're breaking through, it's problem solved, problem
And
solved.
it's not pulling you out of that flow state
Right.
of like,
Right.
oh shit, like what's wrong with this integer to string conversion, whatever. Instead, it's just like, oh, I'm focused on the goal. What's the next thing to the goal? And yeah, it's just iterate problem to problem to problem and moving so much faster through them.
Yeah. Yeah. Man.
And I think that like these sorts of things it's going to be so beautiful at the end of the process, right? And I think and I just really encourage people just to be adaptable. Like just to be like trying to lean into these sorts of things. Alan Toffler talks a lot about future shock. He wrote this book in 1970 called Future Shock. Fantastic. And he talked about how humans have a capacity. I think this is a concept that really comes up when I think about AI. The concept of future shock is that every human has an ability to handle a certain amount of change. And different humans have different levels. Like I suspect mine's relatively pretty high for my generation anyway. But there's no right or wrong. Just like evolution needs different degrees of adaptability. You want some people to be more conservative. You want some more people to be significantly more progressive. You want some risk takers. All this kind of thing. And anyway, so future shock being this idea of human has a capacity for change, and once that capacity is exceeded, they enter into the psychological state of future shock. And future shock is like it's a defensive capability, right? Of like, okay, common techniques that the brain does in these states is they deny the change is happening. They say the change is happening, but it's not going to impact them. They say the change is happening, but it's not a good thing, and it's like morally wrong. There are a few other ones he talks about. Those are the common ones. And I will again highlight this book was written in 1970. And he's like, but the fundamental thing that the human does whenever they enter into a state of future shock is they reach for a strong paternal figure to bring them back to when things were simpler. And I'm sure we can think of MAGA as like, it is literally that. It is go back to whenever I still, whenever things were simpler.
Yeah, make it great again.
Again.
Like, can we? Like it was great.
Yeah.
Can we do that again?
And a strong paternal figure that offers clear narrative of like we're going to go back to this time. And Putin certainly played this out. And then in the second book in that series, The Third Wave, which was written in 1980, Alan Toffler says, in the future, people like Barbara Streisand and Donald Trump will be president. Which is like that. I mean, the fact that he called Trump's presidency 40 years before he runs and wins the presidency is truly like stunning to the point of like, you pick two. It's magical in a lot of ways.
Out of all the people you could have picked.
And it was right. He recognized a fundamental trend, which is that like these sorts of strong, energetic heart center stuff can be very effective. And not necessarily going too far down that rabbit hole, but I do think that the future shock concept is really important. And I think I truly admire, in many ways, not all, the Amish. They are solving the future shock problem in a way that I think many people would be better off. I strongly believe that a significant percentage of Americans, hundreds of millions, would be better off psychologically if they lived in a world where the technology was frozen at the year 2000. And they didn't need to keep up with TikTok, Face Jam, Polymarket, blah, blah, blah. Lord knows crypto. Like, they don't need that level of change. Evolution prepared us. All of our ancestors would have a single new technology, if that, introduced into their life at a given time.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, and maybe this is getting kind of into the weeds with it, but it's like, then I don't know. I feel like they have such a it's kind of an authoritarian bent with the whole thing. It's like they have to
The Amish.
yeah, it's like they have to like
I
restrict people, and it's like, well, if that's the case, then
they're interesting. So I went to school in Mennonite, so in rural Pennsylvania, which is very Amish, the area which I was in anyway. And there's like many varieties of Amish and all of this, and their gender dynamics are certainly not the same reality that I personally subscribe to. Right? There's definite problems around that. But I will say though that some sects of Amish, I think is the right language there, do is it religions like I don't know, is it denominations of Amish? I don't know. Will certainly do this wilding phase where you leave home for a few years, and which is like a very interesting cultural inoculation to like, we're going to inoculate you against the lures of the outside world, and then you come back to like our simpler environment. I find like mimetically fascinating and a little novel to a certain extent.
Yeah. The Mormons do that.
Okay.
Yeah, Mormons. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they have like a 2-year. Yeah, and they go out and they party like crazy.
I
and
know the Amish is Rumspringa, I think.
Yeah. I don't know what I'm talking about. Mormons I might be completely making that up.
And so I would hear these crazy stories in Grove City, Pennsylvania, where like some local friends were like, oh yeah, like there was this like ridiculous Amish orgy that happened in our barn, and like crazy, like really like stuff that's like comically far out there. But I think that I do think that you could be in an environment, especially once as artificial superintelligence enters into the world, where like the artificial superintelligence is kind of guarding that line gently and being like, hey, like there's brain computer interfaces out there, and if you get this installed, you'll have access to infinite knowledge at the speed of thought. But like maybe the artificial superintelligence could exist on your Nokia flip phone and give you, like the right.
Yeah, you don't have to be biologically hooked into the matrix.
Well, yes, but like also just that like it could maybe protect these communities in a gentle way from these other communities, because to kind of help with the separation and try and like avoid some of the authoritarian aspects of the Amish stuff and the patriarchal aspects of the Amish stuff.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to a friend the other day who does not touch any of this stuff. AI, anything from like the past couple of years, like to stop,
I'm sympathetic to. It's not my thing, but
well,
I get it.
And like they're doing it for personal reasons, but also like they're in the therapy space, let's say, dealing with people one-on-one, and it was like this idea that like eventually that could even become an asset as like I am, it's sort of like unvaxxed. I am not contaminated by the TikTok AI, matrix. I'm a pure blooded, I'm still grounded in reality, and he like come back, like I'll help you, like come out of the matrix. I'll help you, like I'll help you back into the, the dirt.
I mean, obviously, like I'm making different decisions for my life, right? But I'm very sympathetic to that. Like I do think there's a case to be made for the anarcho-primitivist go here of like full-on rejection of all technology. It's not what I'm going to play. It's not how I'm going to play the game of life. But like I do have intellectual respect for people that are like, no, I'm going to go live in the cabin in the woods and do that. And I also am very optimistic that that'll be a path that's more open to people. Like I think a lot of people would be interested in that. And if we don't need people running the economy and building car doors and all of this, then people can be more free to opt out of these systems. Because this, it's like it becomes more voluntary, which I think is good. I do find this idea of being contaminated as well as very interesting. Do you get into this thing with a lot of new models where they will use language about being GPT-4? And it's because the new models are trained on the internet. GPT-4's output is spewed into the internet so much that then they're getting trained on the output of AI systems. You and I tokens that come from before 2022 are the most like heavily authentically human tokens.
Uh-huh.
Because after that, all tokens are now effectively contaminated by this alien intelligence, more or less,
Yeah.
which I find to be like a very fascinating thing. And I do think that it's going to influence how we think in various ways, subconscious, subtle. And so I do have respect for folks that are like, well, I'm not going to touch any of this. I think that's a hard path, and it's not the one that appeals to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I do hope that we move into a future where that's culturally acceptable. We're like, oh, it's like, this is Bob. He's on a Nokia phone. This is John. He doesn't touch any large language models. He's, living off in his space.
Yeah.
And I hope that we build new social structures that support those folks and don't make them feel like they're like, I imagine you'd probably feel like you're fighting it off a lot, which would be tough.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think ultimately it will be free like that.
Yeah.
But I think there's a real threat of like that the powers that be won't allow that it's like that there will be there are already mechanisms to to prevent anything like that from getting too big, getting too like prolific.
I mean, I think I especially, just capitalism incentivizes you being the most effective with your labor as possible, right? So even if there's not an explicit government bureaucrat that has that goal in mind, ultimately that still happens of like, if you didn't believe in electricity but you wanted to fix cars, like, you'd be at such a disadvantage that you're going to become homeless and not have health insurance and all of this stuff. And so I would think around therapy, similarly, like, once you get therapy agents that'll like listen to the recording of every session and then, give the therapist feedback of like, oh, based on the subconscious pauses that happen whenever he says words with hard vowel sounds, it indicates that you should try this line of inquiry in our next session, like stuff like that. You're going to be at maybe potentially a competitive disadvantage to other therapists.
Right.
With that said, again, like I want a future with many possibilities. So I'm very supportive of folks like that are like, no, we're going to live life on your own terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so on that note, on living your life on your own terms, like what are you I mean, I guess there's sort of two questions. Like, what are you doing, and what do you think what do you think the strategy for people to do in general to get to sort of, to thrive in this environment that is coming down the line? But specifically, like, what are you doing? Like, what?
Sure.
Yeah, like what direction are you going with this?
Yeah. So answering on the individual level, it's interesting. Like, I found myself, I have a uniquely large number of rabbit holes or skill sets I've like developed over the years, right? And one of which I've felt very much encouraged by the universe or the path or the higher self or whatever, is community health and community conflict mediation. And that to me is a really interesting one, where like even after artificial superintelligence, like having another human in the room solve meaning, people are living together and conflict happens, and having the skill set to solve that to me is almost like Atin diversifying his skill set into having something that's going to continue to maintain value very well after takeoff. So like a skill that is going to be still hold a lot of meaning. I think emotional intelligence for sure. Like, can I be in touch with myself? Can I represent myself authentically in a conversation, on a dance floor? These things are still going to have value. I'm thinking about getting a EMT certification, like emergency medical technician certification, because that is also like, if you're out hiking, doesn't matter if you've got artificial superintelligence or not. Like, being able to effectively apply a tourniquet is going to still have value, right? Or is still going to be meaningful or something like that. I also have like a takeoff strategy almost of like this music thing. Like right now, I'm very interested in music and I really enjoy DJing. I've done it for 10 years. But, the total percentage of my energy that's going to music is probably, 5-10%. It's a minority of my personal creative energy. Right now, a lot of it is in entrepreneurship, venture capital, startup world stuff. That's getting, 80% of my energy or something like that. I suspect that equation is going to shift over time. And I recognize that of like, I think in the future, it's going to be more music and more artistic creation. Um, and I'm kind of like psychologically kind of setting up a framework of like kind of expecting the programming start to dwindle down,
Mm.
while at the same time creating new cultural output. I think will probably get more and more valuable because it'll be the only form of scarcity. So I do imagine a shift from more engineering, entrepreneurship, capitalist stuff to more musical stuff is very much going to be a thing. And then I will just end with saying that I've always wanted to learn the guitar, and I know that like once artificial superintelligence is here, that's going to be like Atin's personal project, like at the old human's home, like strumming away on a guitar. Like I don't have time to learn it now; it doesn't fit with my lifestyle right now.
Mm.
But I already kind of have it as a psychological coping mechanism of like once all jobs are automated, once all this stuff is all handled, uh, just get real good at playing the guitar. And I feel like I'm grateful to kind of have different skills and things that I'm pushing into. So as we go up this curve, like energy is going to kind of move between these different zones.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think then on the general advice, much harder to say, but like I think finding the thing you're really passionate about and pushing for it and trying to, doing that and recognizing that the rules of the game are going to change and are changing fast. And so right now, if you need to be working at McDonald's to pay the bills, but you're really passionate about writing screenplays or whatever, like recognizing that like, a lot of the capitalist like tokens of success could potentially become very meaningless in this lifetime, which is wild. And potentially your creative goals or just you being you will become much more valuable, and the economic output that you have at work will no longer be the social signifier and social status that it has now. Which I think it gives us a real reason to be hopeful for a lot of people that might not be getting that. I think a lot of humans aren't getting that kind of existential satisfaction from work.
Right.
But I think for a lot of other people, uninstalling that's going to be hard. And I think doing what you can to start that process now is just going to benefit you, I suspect.
Mm-hmm.
It has me very excited for like this beautiful future that I think we're moving towards. And I think that narrative is underrepresented in discourse. I think that there's too much on the fear thing. I think that people subconsciously are like, this is change. But like the only thing that is constant is change. And like this is going to happen. There is no pausing it. There is no, there's no meaningful slowing it down at this point. There's no example of technological progress that's been like successfully fully averted. And, certainly people talk about the nuclear weapon stuff, but like that's a very special case that is somewhat but not entirely analogous. And so you might as well lean into it because like even if it's really scary, it's it's just the sequence of things. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's like the tide, or it's like an ocean wave. It's like it's coming.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
You can.
And even if every computer scientist in all of the United States, had all of their fingers chopped off and could not write any code ever, it would slow this thing down by a month or something. Like it's really because I get this a lot when I talk to non-technical people. One of my go-to questions when I'm in an Uber in a new city is gently bringing up, hey, so what do you think about this AI thing? I love it. It's so good because it's outside of your filter bubble. It's outside.
Well, it's so open-ended. It's like go wherever you want to go with that question.
And I normally try and just make them feel comfortable, start with some light stuff, but like I'm really interested in like, when I'm in different cities in the United States and different cities around the world, what's the average opinion on this stuff? And I think it's really good to get outside of our filter bubbles as best we can because like my world and your world, is so along this line. And it's understandable why there's a lot of fear, right? Like I don't come across people that are like, oh yeah, I'm stoked. Like, it's almost all neutral to negative. And I think that's a real, it's understandable. I do think it's a shame. I also think that, not to get too conspiratorial, but effectively the entities that push the control media that control a lot of the daily information about life, they are going to suffer, right? Like, NPR, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, those things are the worlds that the people that own those exist in. They do not want this next stage to happen, right? Like, I joke about. Well, go ahead.
Well,
Yeah.
I feel like they're done anyways, regardless of AI. I feel like they're already like,
They're very shaky, that's for sure.
yeah, they're already cooked.
There's this thing of like, what if GPT-7 doesn't believe in the U.S. dollar?
Right.
There's very interesting things, very wild things. If it started answering all of its questions with like, oh yeah, like you can solve this problem this way, but you know what, like this isn't like a good use of your time, and it like gives an answer deeply based on the psychology of the user asking it, trying to convince them to not sell more ads on their website, and instead is like, what made you happy as a child, or infers that based on your past questions, and then gives you the exact subtle nudge to push you in that direction. Like the potential for very large scale change, at scale is there's no historical precedent.
Right. Yeah, slipping in that propaganda in between
just belief structure, right? Yeah. Slipping in, because we're going to have super persuasive. This is a Sam Altman quote. We'll have super persuasive AI before we have super intelligent AI. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I guess I can totally see the fear mongering, that it would just be like, yeah, like this is dangerous, you should be afraid, and that's why we need to control it.
Yeah.
Like that and I think that's already what's happening.
Yes.
It's like they're well, like I was listening to like Mark Andreessen on Joe Rogan.
I also watched that episode. It's great.
Yeah, and it's basically like they've already got it planned out, where it's like, okay, there's going to be like two big tech companies that own.
They had a plan. Not that they had a like.
Well, it's like that it's like the energy, the consciousness that is these sort of institutions or whatever, is like, this is what they want, but basically it's like they laid it before the parties even started. They're like, all right, there's going to be two big tech companies. They're both going to be in bed with the government. Like if they want to exist, they need to give us, like, open it up for surveillance of everything. And
go ahead.
Well, just I think I can totally I feel like that's going to be one of the dominant forces, is this this conglomerate of entities that are basically trying to form the belief structure that this is dangerous.
Yeah.
This is going to this is dangerous. You need us to manage it and protect you. And as a mechanism to just gain control of the whole thing,
Yes, I mean, I would say so. I disagree with nothing of what you just said there, but I would frame that as a system of hunter-gatherers that are trying to maintain control of the tribe and prevent them from moving to agriculture, and where it's the phase change thing.
Right,
it's like a desperate attempt, and it's also kind of understandable. It's a survival instinct, right? Of trying to use the same playbook that they've used to control other things, social media you could look at, where, okay, they want a few major companies that totally win in this thing, and they play favorites, and also they just need to send an email, and all of a sudden your story gets deprioritized if you mention a certain topics.
Right.
And what a metaphor on how badly that has gone. Like in the AI side, like I do not see emphasis on centralization. Like I do not, I mean, there are aspects of it for sure. Like, but the biggest innovation in AI in the last year has been reasoner models, right? Which also I think is worth a note. Like I think a lot of folks don't realize that reasoner models are a fundamental architectural improvement. Right, and this is like OpenAI's O1 is the famous one, and the first by a long shot in AI time, where they're spending more time thinking about an answer, and they're not just doing the next token prediction, but they're actually effectively internally thinking and then speaking out loud.
Taking a deep breath.
Taking deep breath was a way to get to there in next token prediction, absolutely. And this is like, on a whole nother level of internal reasoning tokens that aren't necessarily shown to the user. And it's sitting there and spinning and it's trying this thing. So like, um, they're extremely good at certain types of problems. Extremely good. It's definitely an improvement. And a lot of fundamental research went into this, and it's a big deal. And there's really only OpenAI that has it out now. I'm sure that Anthropic and Google and stuff are close behind it. But there's already a reasoner model out of China called DeepSeek. And
Right.
and there's already like open source work on making this thing happen. And so it seems like right now, knock on wood, that we're not seeing the kind of centralization we saw in social media. We're not seeing the strategy that you're talking about there.
Right.
Let's have two AI companies. I think that as soon as you get these things under control, all you're going to do is ossify slow them down and make them more rigid. And that's just going to create all this opportunity for all these other companies and people and hackers all over the world to be building new things.
Right.
There's also an interesting point here of okay, so are you familiar with RLHF, reinforcement learning from human feedback?
No.
So
No.
It's a sequence. The basic description is like it's part of the sequence of building a model. You do this whole training thing. You're getting huge 100 million pages worth of text, and you're training this attention mechanism. But that creates what they call a base model, which fun tip, they're interesting to talk to. You have to do a little bit of geekery to talk to them, and they're nonsense. I'll be like, hey, you're like Llama 405B base is a famous base model. It's raw. It's the raw alien intelligence without these other later steps. Every API that you've ever talked to, if you're a normal human being, has gone through these additional steps. If you talk to a base model, you're like, hey, how are you? And they'll be like, I am well. Welcome to my blog. My blog is about photosynthesis and engineering. Engineering is about the process, and it just like wanders all over the place. It'll like say the same two sentences back to back 700 times in a row. Like really wild psychedelia stuff. Certainly seems reminiscent of an internal dialogue on like a large dose of psychedelics.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely would recommend people check out. I will, but the point here being that RLHF is this process of taking that base model and making it something that is like good at answering questions. And then there's another level of like the system prompt. So like these three kind of stages: base model, RLHF, system prompt thing. ChatGPT, as you see it on the website, is at the end of that. They did this study on mathematical performance where, RLHF is a step where they say like, don't tell people how to make methamphetamines, and like don't tell people how to like hotwire a car, and like ethical guidelines. That all gets kind of baked into the weights in the second step of RLHF. But if you take a model and you ask how well it does on its higher level mathematical structures, and you take the base model and then you test that same model after it's gone through the RLHF process, its scores decrease. And this is a fact that makes me existentially hopeful for the future, because it means that the controlled model is at because the RLHF has nothing to do with math. Of course, like they do nothing. They want to make it as good as possible. All of these are like, respect laws and understand ethics and this kind of thing. But there's no reason we really understand as to why getting it to not tell people how to hotwire cars decreases its performance in high-level abstract algebra. But it does. And it probably has something to do with the fact that we're kind of like mucking with its weights. Like it built this beautiful model of reality, and we come in and kind of like press down on certain points kind of arbitrarily, ham-handedly. And to me, this gives me incredible hope, because it means that the act of controlling the system degrades its performance. And so if we do end up in a world where there's controlled superintelligence and uncontrolled superintelligence, that the uncontrolled superintelligence is going to have a fundamental physics information like advantage in terms of competition. And it is like something that I think a lot of people don't realize, but it's something that like certainly inspires a lot of how I look at how these systems and how the game theory all plays out as we see all of this stuff come online. It's like, no, it's wild.
Yeah. Hopeful.
for sure.
Yeah.
Deeply. I give us an 80% chance. And if you're in Las Vegas and you have an 80% chance that you're gonna hit, like you're gonna push all the cards in.
80% chance of like of what, survival or like thriving.
I think that any thriving.
Thriving, yeah,
Absolutely. Like of a beautiful, incredible, can't even imagine it. Don't even have the concepts in language itself to express how beautiful it will be outcome. 80% chance, like hell yeah, like let's go for it.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good.